This week, Dr. Branden Williams joins us on the show. I'm told he's an author, a blogger, a pilot, and a lover of bourbon. And for that last part, we thought we'd get along with Branden, so we decided to have him on the show. Our technical segment comes from our friends at Javelin Networks. They're going to talk about how compromise happens. Active Directory is vulnerable, so we'll get some technical aspects of Active Directory from our fine friends at Javelin Networks. In the news this week, Gravity Scan is a WordPress site scanner. Police swoop in on a gang that planted a Trojan on 1 million phones. That's a lot of plastic condoms going on our phones. Ransomware and the Internet of Things. How to avoid damage from insider threats. A wormable code execution bug in Samba. I guess that's kind of a big deal as well. Twitter allowed at one time for you to tweet from any account. That's kind of interesting. And stories from a different show that I somehow ended up in my show notes. And more. All that and more on this edition of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Brought to you by Gain control of cyber risk with Tenable.io, the first vulnerability management platform built for today's elastic assets like cloud, containers, and web apps. Discover a fresh, asset-based approach that prioritizes vulnerabilities while seamlessly integrating into your environment. And improve ROI with the first elastic licensing approach based on assets, not IP addresses. Tenable.io delivers the data and context you need to secure your elastic attack surface. Start your free Tenable.io trial today by visiting Tenable.io. Onapsis is the leading provider of solutions to protect ERP systems from cyber attacks. Customers can secure their SAP and Oracle business-critical platforms from espionage, sabotage, and financial fraud risks. Visit them on the web at onapsis.com. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, securing code and connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/ESW.
Hey, we're live. Imagine that. Usually they cut to, hey, this is Paul. Welcome to Security Weekly. This is episode 515. Larry, did you want to introduce me? WTF. Someone needs to cut the liquor off to the production crew.
I mean,
they need to be cut off. They're definitely cut off.
Wow. I mean, because like I had this great shawarma
Okay,
joke.
well, we'll do it.
And all right, well, welcome to the show because let me introduce you to my good friend Paul Sidorian, a man who makes his own shawarma. Herpes optional.
Sometimes multiple times a day I make shawarma.
Yes.
It's it's really good. Hey, welcome everyone to the show. This is fantastic. I'm so excited to be here. We've got a fantastic show lined up for you, provided our production crew doesn't pass out before the end of the show, which it could happen. It could happen. I'm just saying. Let me introduce everyone first and then do some announcements. And then we'll bring Branden on, okay? So to my left is none other than Mr. Larry Pesce. And Larry,
Oh,
you are,
right.
in fact, hold on, I got this, Director of Research and Senior Managing Consultant at InGuardians.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Welcome. It's nice to have you in studio.
Yes.
We missed you.
I missed being here. I love doing this every Thursday. This is like the man retreat.
It is.
You know, my wife gets her woman retreat once a week, and I get the man retreat type of thing. So
Sometimes you like a woman retreat, I know.
I
It's
do.
okay.
I do.
You like to go for your pedicure.
Usually like to go on those woman retreat with other women, though. It's just me. It's just me.
On the lines via Skype, crypt analyst, InfoSec analyst, pioneering ex-NSA pen tester, PCI specialist, and certified curmudgeon, Mr. Jeff Mann. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? It seems like I haven't been here in forever.
I know. It's nice to have you on the lines via Skype. Also, we have Mr. Jack Daniel, who works for Tenable Network Security and is the co-founder of Security B-Sides. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Speaking of
Great to be
curmudgeons.
with you.
Yeah, speaking of curmudgeons, fellow curmudgeon. And a very special appearance.
Hello, curmudgeon.
Hasn't been on this show in a little while. Michael Santarcangelo, the founder of SecurityCatalyst.com, author of Into the Breach, and asker of our favorite question, what problem are you trying to solve? Mr. Michael Santarcangelo. Michael, welcome.
That's it. I'm excited to be here.
You just
Kicked
came
everybody
here.
out of the house. Said I'm going to be on the show tonight. And,
Nice.
So they left.
That's awesome. That's great.
Ooh.
Everyone needs a break, you know. Oh, quick announcements. IT Pro TV's courses now include Apple Certified Support Professional, CompTIA, Security Plus, and ITIL Planning, Protection, and Optimization. Premium annual memberships include all video content, as well as access to virtual labs and Q&A forums. If you're not a Security Weekly listener or viewer, you'd pay $85.70 a month or $857 per year. But since you are, if you're hearing me say this, a Security Weekly listener or viewer, for a limited time, you get 30% off monthly membership for the lifetime of your active subscription using the code SW30. That's right.
I was going to say, Paul, if they're not listeners, they're not hearing you talk.
That's right. That's right.
You worked it out.
I did. I got really good at reading that ad, which means they're going to switch it out on me.
Perfect.
The SANS Pentest Hackfest Summit call for presentations is now open, hosted by renowned hacker and SANS instructor, Mr. Ed Scotus. They're looking for presentations on attack techniques, remediation challenges to existing security methodologies, and more. I'm going to cut that short because you know what? Tomorrow at 5 p.m. is the cutoff. So if you haven't thought about your CFP submission by now, by the time you hear this, it could possibly be too late. If you are listening live, perhaps, and you want to submit a CFP, SANS Pentest Summit, Pentest CFP at SANS.org with the subject line, SANS Pentest Hackfest Summit CFP 2017. The event will take place November 13th through the 14th at the Hyatt Regency in Bethesda, Maryland. That's right. Are you going to Hackfest, Larry? Did I ask you this
Yep.
already? You're going, yeah. Okay.
Yep, I believe I am. Well, let's put it this way. I am teaching there, but I'm unsure if I'll be there for the 2 days prior. I probably should submit something to the CFP.
You should do that tomorrow before 5 p.m.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But I'll be there teaching.
That's excellent. Dr. Branden Williams is here with us. He has 20 years of experience in business technology and information security. Branden, as I said before, does all that stuff. And then in his spare time, he actually has spare time, which is interesting, you'll find him flying airplanes, chasing storms, or manning a barbecue pit. But tonight, he's on Paul Security Weekly. Branden, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yes, it's nice to... Now, you haven't been on the show before?
No, I've not been on the show before.
Okay. I didn't think so, but I didn't do any extensive research to figure that out. So
It's okay. We're at a new low, right?
That's right.
515 is a new low.
That's it. New low. Branden's on the show. It's all downhill from here. So, Branden, why don't you tell us how you got your start in information security?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's a very interesting story, but I used to be a network administrator, a system administrator, like a lot of guys that you hear and folks that are listening. And we had a box that got hacked, and it really interested me what the guy did. He busted in through an IMAP vulnerability. It was a service that shouldn't have been run in the first place, and made up some fake domains and put some websites on there. And it was it just sort of got me really interested in like how can I do better protecting from the outside. And then when I was running the ISPs I had to protect myself from the users that were using the ISP. This was mid-90s, so there were some weird guys out there, still are.
I was going to say that had to be like mid to late 90s if it was an IMAP vulnerability.
Yeah. Right.
There's an excellent trivia questions with some of those older vulnerabilities. That may be one that we dig into in our next round of trivia. So, Brandon, you recently, or not so recently, gave a talk at RSA on how consumers don't care about breaches. And I think that's interesting because we cover breaches pretty much every week here on the show. And we often speculate if consumers care or not. And on our show, just as a track record, most of the time we agree consumers probably don't care. However, I have seen more recent research that says consumers really do care, maybe for a period of time, but it wears off quickly. What's your take on the issue?
Yeah, so the original reason I decided to do this research is I was on a warpath when I was working at First Data, and I was trying to find any sort of FUD related to our products and kill it. And somebody put a presentation together, and there was a slide in there that's quoted a very prominent research firm, incorrectly quoted, but said that 70% of customers would not go back to a place after been breached. And then right next to it was like a Home Depot logo and a Sears logo and a Target logo, and I'm like, pretty sure those guys are doing fine.
Yep.
So I really dug into it, and what I discovered is a couple of things. One of them is that the research methods that people were using are flawed. They're using something called effective forecasting, which is where, like, you go to somebody on the street corner and you just ask them, you say, hey, you see that, Orange Julius over there, it gets breached. Are you going to go back? Because we went way back in time for a minute there.
Yeah, I was going to say,
And,
man, I haven't been to an Orange Julius since like the 90s.
So you would say
Orange
of course
Julius is like a drink, right? Was that like a
it's
restaurant
a-
chain? Hold
yeah.
on, fill me in. It
was
was
a
a restaurant.
shop.
It's like the original smoothie.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Sorry. Continue.
No, so you ask the consumer this question while they're looking at the Orange Julius, and they say, well, of course I don't want to go back because, you're programmed that's a bad thing that happened, and you should say to the person looking at you that you shouldn't go back. But we already know that's not the case, right? Because we have the bystander effect where, you could go up to somebody on the street and say, hey, there's a crime happening over here. Are you going to call the police? They'll tell you, yes, they will. But in reality, when that actually happens, they don't. They wait for somebody else to do it. So what I also looked at was, when I say consumers don't care, I think consumers, they have a reaction to it, but they still use their money at those stores. And so as an example, with Target as an example, if it's Saturday night at 9 o'clock and you're out of diapers and you've got a newborn at home and Target's the closest store, you're going to Target and you're probably using your credit card to pay for the diapers and the 6-pack of beer that you're going to buy, right? And
Hold on. Wait a minute. Couple of points there. In Rhode Island, we can't buy beer at Target. It's a tragedy.
Can't buy a liquor or alcohol or any type of alcohol at Target.
That's right. And also, when you go to Target to buy diapers, you're spending at least $120 on other stuff that you didn't know you needed until you walked into Target.
And none of it alcohol.
In Rhode Island, none of it alcohol.
Well, either way, you're going to walk away and you're going to use your credit card to pay for all that stuff, the non-alcohol sad shopping cart that you put together.
Yes. Well, it might be good stuff in there. Anyway, no, you're right, though.
Yeah, so what we did is I polled 1,000. It was about, I think it was 1,031 respondents. And their only requirements, they had to have a credit card or debit card. It had to be between the ages of 18 and 70. And unfortunately, it is limited to the U.S., so this is U.S.-focused research, could be different in other parts of the world. But, even when you talk about awareness, what we did is instead of asking them if they would go back, we asked them if they were aware of any of these breaches after we asked them if they'd shopped at one of 15 stores. So in order to qualify, you had to have shopped at Home Depot, Target, Toys R Us in the last 12 months. If you did qualify, then we ask about awareness of breaches. And as you can imagine, like Home Depot and Target are really the only two that people really, gravitated towards.
And then in your research, did you find that they still shop there, obviously?
Absolutely, and they would come back within a month. So, really what the end game for this is it's you got to view breaches more like a natural disaster, a hurricane, a flood, something like that, right? It does have a material impact to the company when it comes to capital reserves. If you wanted to expand 30 stores next year, guess what? You're probably not going to do it if you have a huge cash outlay that you're going to be spending on fixing security things and lawyers and other stuff like that. And it does impact your cost of capital too. So long term, as you go to borrow more money, it's going to be more expensive because you lower your asset base in many cases. So it's still one of those, if I can survive it for a couple of months, customers will come back.
But that's true, Brandon. Talk about the sociology aspect of that. With really any major catastrophic event or even minor catastrophic event, right? So, for example, the one I was thinking, and people have this reaction that lasts only for a certain period of time that when something bad happens. So, for example, bounce houses. If you have kids and you've ever rented a bounce house, I have to rent one tomorrow. I have to call the place and rent one for my son's party.
You were supposed to do that today, weren't you, Paul?
I definitely was supposed to do that today and did not do it. I apologize to my wife. I suck at life. Moving on from that, though, a while back, if you remember, there was a news story that went around that a child died because they were on a bounce house or severely injured. I forget which, because they were on a bounce house and it blew away, right?
With them in it.
Big gust of with them in it. Big gust of wind came, blew the bounce house away.
Best bounce house ever.
For a while, everyone was like, "Oh my God, I'm not letting my kid go on a bounce house." But then people forgot about that and they let their kid. We had a bounce house like the next week at our party, and kids went on it, and no one died. It was amazing.
I know.
It was amazing. But I think people had those similar reactions to breaches, Brandon.
Yeah, it's top of mind. It's just like the news cycle, right? Whatever the top story is, that's what people talk about. And then when that gets trumped by the next one, so to say, then they're going to go for that one.
Did you say that purposely, trumped?
No, I wish that I was smart enough to say that purposely.
That was pretty good, though. You should have taken credit for that.
Yes, I said it purposely.
Always take credit.
I think the timing this week of the Target fine of $18.5 million is interesting because a lot of people acted like that's a lot of money, and it is, right? But they have $69.5 billion in gross revenue, and I want to say net operating income was like $2.8 billion. So 18 million hurts, but. That's not that big a deal when you're running at 70 billion revenues.
Still kind of petty cash.
For
them.
I jokingly said on Twitter that it was a rounding error, and then the Twitter pedants started with the well actuallys. But
yeah, but you know what though, Jack? That also resonated with like a lot of the leadership folks. You were quoted at least 3 times to me today. And I was like, yep, that was Jack. And you got it exactly right. More importantly, in what Brandon's research underscores is, look, if I stick a microphone in your face and say, a really bad thing happened, like a breach, so are you going to do that? No. But if we go look at actual behavior, it turns out, yeah, they don't actually care. And so where people always get weirded out then, right? So there's like 3 basic reactions to that Target stuff. Either, well, that's a lot of money, or, well, see, that's not enough money. But, the other reaction is, yeah, right, it's not really a big deal. P.S., it was a credit card breach, which you're protected on in the U.S. and most of the rest of the world. And, there's a cost of doing business, carry on. And it's like we make all this hubbub over it. So what I love about Brandon's research is it's like, yeah, people don't actually really change their habits at all. Now, we can argue elasticity of choice, but the reality is not a big deal. Does it mean we're not important? Debate. But, whatever.
Well, I mean, take Yahoo as an example. I mean, Yahoo's had a slew of bad press, but still millions of people, for whatever reason, still use Yahoo.
Yahoo!
Yeah, but that's free. I think that's
true.
To Michael's point, if you want to lose customers, you can have bad prices and low quality products and crappy customer service.
So how does Harbor Freight stay in business?
Because they're dirt cheap. Right? The
Because they beat everyone on
That's
price.
Yeah, they win on price. But I won't name names here, but I ranted on Twitter this week about somebody that I've spent tens of thousands with, and I'm just like done. And they may or may not have been breached, but it doesn't matter. I've certainly shopped at Target and Home Depot in the past year. Not much at Home Depot, but sometimes, like Brandon said, sometimes it's 8:30 at night, and
you need those adult diapers, Jack.
And you need the adult diapers, and you need the industrial ones that they carry at Home Depot because the ones at Target don't have the capacity. Because some of us don't have tiny bladders like Paul. And,
Wow.
how was that for flipping it, huh?
when 9/11 happened, I thought, gee, nobody ever thought about people actually going on a plane and committing suicide by crashing a plane into buildings. But I always figured, okay, air travel is now safe because that won't happen again that time. And I wonder if people have the same, yes, they probably don't know about it, but if they're thinking, well, if Target got breached, now they've probably got security. They're probably doing everything to protect my credit card and personal information, so it's safe to shop there because lightning doesn't strike twice.
I don't think people think that much about it, honestly.
I'll tell you what. I've had a number of friends. Do you remember when we used to make companies like send out letters, like your information's been breached, and so it was there. They'd get a letter. I had friends would say, "What do I do with this?" And this is going back a couple years now, and you'd say stuff like, "Well, that is your checking account. You probably should talk to your bank about getting a new checking account number." Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not interesting. Thanks. Yeah.
Well,
But so the thing is,
well, I got the OPM letter, and my wife did the last.
So you changed your fingerprints then, Jeff?
Yep.
But it's like Branden brought this research to me last year, and I got really excited about it because it's looking at data other than just perception of how do you feel about it. And I think these are more of those conversations because, a lot of times too, we'll say, well, consumers don't care because they don't know better. I don't know. I talk to a lot of really savvy people that have really insightful questions, and they've decided that in the scheme of everything that they've got to deal with in their lives, this is not a big deal to them. And by the way, will they bitch when they've got to change their credit card information? Yeah.
Yep.
But by the way, I broke down. I've tried out. I look like a moron when I use it, but I've used Apple Pay now a couple times. And I got a new credit card issued this week. And guess what? Automatically updated it. I didn't have to do a thing. It updated it across the board for me.
Actually,
Wow.
I was just going to say,
that wasn't a pain in the ass at all.
No, it's getting better. But I think we should come back to our guest. And so let me troll him by saying none of this really matters because PCI protects us.
I thought you were going to go there or chip and pin.
I had a segue similar to that, but Jack did it better.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of what's happening in the PCI space much anymore. I don't think that's a newsflash to anybody. It's sort of changed quite a bit from its initial days. I've had a couple blog posts recently just sort of poking at things that they're doing, and it's just, to me, I think we've grown this thing so big. It's the compliance rates are going down, and the breaches are still happening. That's usually a bad formula, meaning that it's not effective. And I think the compliance rates are going down not only because of certain changes in the standard, but just because it's difficult to do it 100% of the time, all the time. That's the same word, just different ways.
Is it compliance fatigue, like consumers and everyone else have breach fatigue? Is it that the ISO this and NIST that, and GDPR is the latest boogeyman? I was just in Europe. Is that part of the declining compliance rate with PCI?
It could be a little bit, but I think another one is that, when you have something go from 3.1 to 3.2, you're automatically going to have people that won't pass. So anytime you change versions, you're going to run into that. But then you also have the issue where, it's just not so important. The fines really aren't happening like they were. So it's just not as important to hit that date. So if I miss it by a couple months, I'll just talk to my bank. Yeah, we had a finding come up. We got to spend some money. We're going to fix it. And, for the most part, it's fine.
So is the problem enforcement, or is the problem the perception of enforcement? In other words, when PCI first came out, everyone was like, oh my God, we have to be compliant. And then over time, they realized that not being compliant is not maybe a huge deal for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And I think we're experiencing the same thing with GDPR. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is going to be a big deal. But like, what's going to happen if you're not compliant? Do compliance standards go through that kind of evolution?
Yeah, and it's also just the fact that it's really hard to comply all the time. So, the chances that you're going to miss a vulnerability in a quarter is really, really high. The chance that you have some piece of documentation that you didn't update, or a pen test that got slipped because of a production freeze is very, very likely that something like that will happen. And the fines and penalties just aren't. It's not that they were there; they were present in 2007, 2008. But it's less likely I mean, when I worked at an acquirer, we actually did some research, other research around the way, and there were very few merchants getting fined.
Interesting. I'm waiting for...
Also, I don't know if you noticed, but Visa stopped publishing their compliance percentage. So a while ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, they used to publish every quarter. Here's the number of merchants by level, and here's their compliance rate. People are reporting compliant in those levels, and they would estimate level 4, and that was a joke. But the other ones, I mean, they were pretty high. They were in the 90s, and we were seeing in the 70s just last year.
Yeah, I think the last one that was out, Brandon, was maybe late 2015, early 2016. But that would probably be a good time for full disclosure that I used to work for Brandon in the PCI world when we were part of the VeriSign practice. So that was the heyday. We were helping out companies that had gone through major breaches. I thought we were helping them out. I don't know if at the end of the day we helped them at all or not. But
well, I think it goes back to that whole sort of what's the hottest thing right now, right? So I thought we did make a really big difference, 05, 06, 07, 08, 09. Like when we did that work, there were companies that had nothing, and we installed lots of great security practices. They were mandated by PCI, but people calling PCI best practice, even at the time, I'm like, no, that's just good practice. It's practice. There's no word you need to put in front of it. Just do these basic things. But because people have moved on to, other types of compliance initiatives or other security threats, and people freaking out about ransomware and other things, it's just not as important as it was.
Well,
go ahead, Jeff.
I wonder if part of that is just continuing to be the lack of understanding of what it means to apply security to whatever your company is. I mean, a lot of the companies we worked with, and it's been 10 years ago now, 5 years before we were involved, they didn't really think a whole lot about security at all. Until they attached to the internet, until they attached their payment processing to the internet, they didn't really have security as part of their practice. And so they don't have the institutional knowledge. They don't have the background. I mean, I've been going around this year talking about how, one of our favorite customers, Brandon, I remember spending an afternoon with them, explaining to them what protecting data at rest was about, and encryption was one of the options. And of course, I'm a ex-Crippy, so I was kind of probably geeking out on them and telling them all about the different ways that they could protect their data. And they said to me, and this is pretty much the topic of a talk I've been giving this year, yeah, but we don't need DoD level security. But with all the breaches that have been happening and continue to happen, I keep thinking, yeah, you really do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's also supposing that a breach is an actual problem. I'm still waiting on evidence that there's a
Sorry, Michael, you're cutting in and out there.
Breaches happen.
It's just trying to understand if breaches themselves are a problem or they're just a symptom of something. Like we're fixated on a symptom, but there's also car crashes that happen still, right? People still rob banks. The problem in the breach, the problem is if people get to the data and do something with it or whatever.
I think you're splitting hairs a little bit. I mean, breaches in PCI world means credit card data has been stolen. Has the credit card data then been turned around and used to commit fraud? Yeah, maybe that's a different issue.
Has the recent attack trends towards ransomware mean that attackers don't care so much about credit cards? They can make more money with ransomware?
Sure. I mean, when you get the card now, there's a lot of controls. EMV drives that. You can still run a card not present transaction, so e-commerce transactions, and as soon as I want to say it was maybe 2011, 2012. I was talking with the guys at MasterCard, and all you needed was the card number to run a transaction. You didn't need expiration date, any other validation. You could run it with just the card number. And they viewed it as a business decision. If you wanted to take the risk and pay the higher fees, then you're more than welcome to do that with us. So as more businesses start to become a little more, I don't like the fraud. I want to reduce my interchange. I don't, I'll adopt these measures that are supposed to protect me. And, if you're taking MagStripe, it even goes back down to like low tech stuff now. So it's either a card not present transaction where I still have to have a mule to deliver it, or I'll capture the MagStripe off of a chip card and present it to the reader in a way that the reader thinks the chip is damaged so that I can swipe the card. And so then it goes back to that old human thing. You have to look at the card, have to look at it, do a risk evaluation. And if you are a checker at Target, you don't care. All you want is the line to go down. So you just, whatever works, you can go ahead and go.
So, but have merchants or the retailers impacted the effectiveness and ability of attackers to make money so that they've moved on to other things? Is that a trend that we're seeing?
I would say yes. I would say that the value of cards continues to drop just because you have a lot of breaches and they're more difficult to use without additional data elements. And because we're all, I don't know how these carder markets have gotten so loose. It seems like anybody can join them. And so, at my old company, we had guys on staff that were on those markets and scraping the data and realizing like, oh, look, that's one of our issuers. We probably ought to reissue those cards.
Oops. That's really interesting. To circle back around to PCI for a moment, Brandon had a note that says that you did some research on how the PCI Council what they pull in for revenue and fees every year. Now, I have some like insider type information, knowing people who have been through the process to become a certified, PCI auditor, scanner, what have you. And I've been told that people have taken issues with that process. So I'm curious, as it stands today, what your research has uncovered.
Sure. So it's all part of a GitHub project. So you can actually download. It's written in R and R Markdown. So you can actually check out the GitHub package. You can download all the new files from the council and rerun it. I use all public data, so I know that the numbers are understated. This is like there's at least this much money that's going through. And annually, they're pulling in just about $19 million in fees. And it's largely from the QSA program at around 8.2. I'm just looking at the numbers here. Participating organizations a little over 3 million. And then the other programs sort of scatter in there, right? So it's a significant amount of revenue, and they do have significant costs. So I'm not saying that they're just taking this money and doing nothing with it. They do have significant costs in the management company and putting on those conferences and outreach and all that other stuff. It just seems like it's all I wanted to do was say like, all right, you've given me a ton of public data. I know what the fee structure is. Let me just take a swag at it. I mean, do people care? I don't know. It seems like some people cared, but I don't think it's going to do anything. It was more of an interesting project for me than anything else.
So were there other conclusions that you were able to draw from that research, or was it just kind of a measurement that, this is how much they make and it is what it is?
Well, I mean, there were some interesting, like the point-to-point encryption program is bigger in Europe than in the States. The States usually has all of the other ones. They have the PFI program, QSA program. The PA QSA, the payment application QSA, is bigger in Europe as well. My only guess is because they had chip cards longer, and so using some of that technology, maybe there's a reason why there's more of them over in Europe. There's more QSAs as far as companies in the U.S. Than anywhere else. It's still in the old days, we used to talk about the Europeans would view PCI as a magstripe standard because they would say, well, I have the chip, so it's different. I don't need that. And it's not quite correct. There's still some issues. Like you can pull what we consider sensitive data. The chip just considers routing data. So as an example, when you present the chip into the terminal, there's not an automatic encryption routine that occurs. Unless you've turned that on. Otherwise, it'll just route everything clear text over to the acquirer for processing. So, yay. I mean, go ahead.
No, just yay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, that's why I think, still very clearly heavily U.S. The QSA program, I was frankly shocked at how much revenue on the QSA program. Because if you have the inside knowledge, you probably know that people don't like paying all those fees. When we were at VeriSign, we were paying over $100,000 per year in fees for all the training and all of the regions that we wanted to be qualified in. And $8 million is not a small amount of change. It's a lot of money to be spent on arguably something that a lot of people call into question around the quality of.
Mm. Thoughts, comments, questions from the rest of the gang on that, or
nope?
Crickets.
Yeah. Well, all right. So one of the only other things that I can think of that maybe a little bit back to some of the beginning conversation. We talk about some of the research. I definitely say that I can. I've heard some things that confirm some of this type of stuff. Like you think about, oh no, I'll never go back and shop at Target ever again. And as Brandon noted through some of his research, Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong. Target, several months after the breach happened, actually saw massively increased sales numbers.
I believe so, but keep in mind that happened around Christmas too.
Right.
Yeah, it was right before Christmas.
Right, but I mean, this was not at Christmas, but months afterwards. So,
But they have the chip readers now, so it's secure, right?
Yeah.
Actually, it's funny. I used to sit on the EMVCO board. I don't know if that's funny or not, but when I was talking to the lady from Target, she said that they, because they're in this huge reactive mode from the breach, and they put the chip technology in, and they actually did a lot of work that to speed up the transaction. So this was one of the biggest complaints is like, I'm gonna have to hire a bunch of checkers because the transaction time takes forever to interrogate the chip. They did a lot of work on optimizing the algorithms inside the terminal and sort of doing things in parallel that sped up the overall transaction time. And it was good for the U.S. market to learn how to do that because we were, stubborn and hadn't implemented this, by the way, 25-year-old technology since, any earlier. So it was good to get their help on some of that stuff.
Yeah, but I don't know how we're still as bad as we are in the U.S. Just having come back from Dublin, where the little handheld things.
Oh, you have to go there, Jack.
Yeah, the little handheld.
You know what was going to happen, Michael. We're going to talk about chip and pin.
We're not going to do chip and pin. So just chip and sig.
Just chip and signature, right?
Chip and sig.
Just so using the same tech we have here, the time, the speed of transactions is just so much faster over there.
Told you.
Yes, Target has done things, but I think your reference, Brandon, to checkers is hysterical because as if there's somebody that you can give money to at any of the big box stores. There are the automated checkout things which can't figure out how to weigh something light and don't understand heavy things either, and therefore, they have like 3 people standing around to help you check out automatically and speed you through. But that may be a pet peeve too.
The other thing too, when you look at those chip cards in Europe, that was designed for offline transactions initially, right? Because telco here was cheap, so we ran everything in an online transaction, meaning that online in the old days were dial with a modem. But in Europe, they would make 1 call per day and do batch transactions. So if somebody presented a card that with a mag stripe with no money in it, they would walk out with the goods and there was no way to recover it. So with the chip in the old days, if you remember, there used to be stored value cards. So the value of the account would be stored on the chip. And people had figured out how to game that to where they put, thousands of dollars on a chip on an account that didn't exist because there was no live transaction. So I think, here we're geared to do live transaction monitoring. We have a lot of fraud systems that help catch stuff. So the chip thing, didn't need to evolve into us this quickly. But, to Jack's point, like we really got to do a lot of work on speeding up that transaction. And there were some people in the chat, by the way, talking about, Apple Pay or NFC transactions. And those still are
I wanted to ask you about that, Brandon. So I use Android Pay. I used to use Samsung Pay. There's Apple Pay. I'm missing some. And then, but individual retailers now have their own, like, pay systems through their app.
Walmart has one.
Yeah, and, like, I think CVS is implementing one. Like, and it's just really frustrating. Like, I just want one app. Like, the security of it all concerns me. But now, if it's being spread out through all these mechanisms, but what are the risks of using these smartphone essentially payment systems?
So it's a lower risk actually, because when you look at things like Apple Pay, it's a token that is sent down. It's an EMV token, but it's a routable card number that gets sent down to your phone and stored in the secured element. But it's not the underlying plastic. It's not the number that's on the plastic. So it's contextual. If someone were to capture that, they couldn't put it on the back of a card and try to run it in Magstripe because that number is the bin. You get a separate bin. Like, this is an Apple Pay bin, which means that if this is routed, if this number is presented, it must be presented in the context of an Apple Pay transaction. But to your point, why there's so many of these things and there's so many different technologies and implementations, which is why the people that are declaring that the plastic in your wallet is going to be gone in 5 years are smoking something. Like, it is still the easiest thing to do. And I remember I don't think they do this anymore. The cards themselves used to have the radios embedded in them. And I love that, man. I love you just kind of wave it and go. It was great. But, that was faster than MagStripe.
Right. Certainly faster than the chip reader. I find the smartphone payment is faster than the chip, except if you're at a drive-through, then you got to hand your phone to the person, that's just awkward. Like, I don't want someone else holding I'm like, no, you can't have you can give me your reader, but I'm not giving you my phone. Kind of thing, right? Do you think we'll see a consolidation of the platforms on the phone, or are we just always going to have to carry a stinking piece of plastic?
I don't know if we're going to see I don't think consolidation anytime soon. I think people are still trying to figure out and capture different parts of the value stream, figuring out what's the best way to do it and how can I reduce interchange and reduce dependence on interchange as much as possible. And I mean, if you look at how we consume media now, I mean, there's a great parallel that goes there. In fact, just a quick side note, there's some research released that talks about how Netflix is actually destroying our society. And the reason why it's destroying our society is because people will pick a show, you get small groups of people that tack onto a show and they're able to communicate through online mediums. But if you think about in the 60s and 70s, there was 4 channels. Like, everybody the next day talked about whatever the big cliffhanger was, whatever show it was. It brought people together. Well, now if everybody's doing streaming on demand Netflix, or I have my Apple Pay friends and I have my Samsung Pay friends and I've got whatever Starbucks little clicky thing that they, the QR codes and stuff, you sort of see how people get fragmented and it's getting to, I'm going to pick my thing that I like to use and I'm going to shop at merchants that support my thing that I like to use.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that started with Discmans, though. I mean, when people started putting their own music on their own devices that they could put in their headphones, their earbuds, and just listen to their own thing. It used to drive me crazy when my kids were little because they would never listen to an album or a CD, start to finish. They always were like, we'd be driving in the car. Dad, go to track 7, track 5, track 4. I'm like, do you ever listen to it beginning to end? And no, they don't. But I had a question for Branden and for everybody. Given everything that we're saying about PCI and all the shortcomings of it and all the things that we've talked about, what would our industry look like though if PCI hadn't been a thing?
Good question.
Oh my.
Yeah, I don't. So I would never say that PCI didn't serve its purpose, and I think it did some amazing things for retail. I think it's just sort of lost its way a little bit. It got stagnant. It didn't evolve fast enough. It was a victim of its own success in some cases because, when you're testifying in front of Congress and the congressional people don't like it when you create markets or move markets with a standard that's so important like PCI. So, you've noticed that it gets further watered down and more options and more confusing. There's so many requirements in there that are decent, but we could do without a lot of them, especially when you start to look at what even people like Visa are doing. I mean, Visa, they're signaling that they've sort of lost confidence in PCI because there's so many ways you can get out of doing PCI with Visa transactions, doing point-to-point encryption or having certain types of acceptance codes and things. Like, you can do things to not have to submit your compliance to Visa. So I think they're starting to get it that, if we put security into the readers and we incent the right behavior where people will adopt new readers and new technology, then we're going to improve the security of the payment system better than a standard that's going to try to get, millions of companies to do this for us.
But is the whole thing also just reactionary? In other words, anytime I've witnessed in the past almost 12 years of doing this show, something in security, like bad happening, Jeff mentioned September 11th. Recently, we've seen the WannaCry worm. We've seen, breaches. We've seen worms run on an IoT. There is always a group of people, sometimes large, powerful groups of people, that push for some kind of regulation, standard, guideline, compliance effort, law to prevent those bad things from happening. And I think largely the success rate of that in security specifically is pretty poor. In other industries, I think we've had some success, certainly, but in security it's pretty poor. Do you agree?
I do, and I think you can sort of draw parallels between security and safety, because a lot of the regulation that you see is done to preserve lives, property. Breaches don't necessarily remove that, and breaches, for the most part, again, OPM aside, for the most part, they impact a company. And there's risk in being an investor in a company, and risk in managing, and we all have our little pools of risk that we manage, and we should be free to manage them the way that we want to. So in some respects, regulation is really, really challenging, because you end up watering down to some lowest common denominator, so that the weakest guy can walk, stumble over the bar while everyone else is leaping around them.
Well, I think that we've finally come up with the right solution from a legal and legislative point of view by allowing hackback, because that'll fix everything.
Yep.
Had to go there, Jack.
Wow. And if you don't like the question that the reporter's asking you, you can body slam them.
Yeah.
Alternate facts.
Brave New World.
Branden, since you have not been on Paul Security Weekly, you get to play 5 questions with Paul Security Weekly. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
No one's truly ready, but we're going to go anyway. 3 words to describe yourself.
I love meat.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
A serial killer, a garrote.
A garrote.
Garrote.
A garrote. What is a garrote is a...
That's where you get them around the neck and you choke them out with
Yeah.
Yep.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Why does nobody pay attention to me?
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
First.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Ooh. How about Tom Hanks and I don't know. Can I pick 2 dads?
Yeah.
Welcome to 2017,
sure.
man.
We don't judge. We don't judge.
Let's do Tom Hanks and let's do Burt Reynolds.
Oh, that's a good pair. It's a good pair. You get the funny, you get the handsome, sexy kind of thing going on. I like it.
And then you get Tom Cruise.
Well, Branden, thank you very much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly. It was wonderful chatting with you. Some very thought-provoking things about compliance and risk. Glad you were able to make it on the show and make your first appearance. We're going to have to make this a more frequently occurring event other than the first time in friggin' 12 years you've been on the show, dude. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
And with that, we're going to take a short break, come back with our friends from Javelin Networks, talk about how compromise happens in Active Directory. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.
The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Quick announcement before we jump into our technical segment. Come check out Wild West Hack and Fest. Wild West Hack and Fest is put on by Red Team specialists from Black Hills Information Security. They will be holding a conference on October 27th and 28th, and it will certainly be hands-on hardware hacking. Talks from those in the industry like Dave Kennedy, Deviant, Egypt, Chris Nickerson, Chris Gates, Mike Poor, Sub-T, and more. Check them out on the web at wildwesthackandfest.com. That's HACKIN fest.com. It's kind of interesting when I worked for Tenable Network Security for some time, and I think about a vulnerability, how it's associated with some kind of software bug. And we talk about Active Directory vulnerabilities. And I know Bo Bullock just did one of our new shows we're spinning up, Tradecraft Security Weekly. He's been very diligent about it lately. And one of his latest episodes is about Active Directory. Larry, I know you and I have jokingly talked about how it's not really a vulnerability. We're using it as features that were intended to be there. And so when I think of a vulnerability, it's not really. It's more like an exposure rather than a vulnerability. And Almog from Javelin Networks is here with us tonight to talk more about it. Almog, welcome to the show. Now, you weren't on last time, were you?
Yeah, it is my first session. Last time it was Roy and Guy, my other co-founders.
Okay, but we've had been on a conference call before. That's why I was confused. So, it's nice to chat with you. Almog, just very quickly, give us a little bit about your background and set the stage for the little demo that you're going to give today as well, and talk about the problem.
Sure. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Almog, and I'm from Javelin. I'm the chief product of the company. I established the company together with Roy and Guy. I'm the third founder. Me and Roy served together in the Israeli Air Force. We have doing a mutual serving like 2 years together. Afterwards, I worked companies like Cisco and Orange, doing red team, network design, security design. So I've been in the information security more than 12 years now. And Javelin is exciting for me because we want to solve a real a problem that caused any enterprise a huge headache. So today, I guess it's more about the problem, show you how easy it is to reconnaissance the AD without having any privilege escalation. And afterwards, even doing a privilege escalation, it's like a completely game over once you have this domain admin user.
Gotcha. And this is a very common technique on penetration tests today, and particularly because it's so hard to defend against, right? I mean, I think that's it's kind of a compounding problem, right? It's easy to do reconnaissance, but it's also like not so easy. You can't just go turn all this stuff off in Active Directory. It's like by design, it's how it's working, correct?
Exactly. So Active Directory is about user experience. It's great feature. It's great database. It's designed not to protect you against security. It's supposed to give you a great user experience. You have all this internal Microsoft application which integrate to Active Directory and give you the single sign-on capabilities, whether it's Exchange or Link or any other applications that integrate into the Active Directory. So attacker natively take this advantage and just go for the same way, go against the Active Directory database and fetch any information they want without any security professional be aware to, because it's legitimate. Again, it's by design. Microsoft allow you to do so. all this reconnaissance and information gathering against this database.
Gotcha. Awesome. So Almog, show us how it's done. Show us what an attacker, pen tester or not, typically goes through to do some reconnaissance on Active Directory.
Sure. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
If there's an elephant, yes.
There's an elephant in the room, literally.
Exactly. So
Okay,
this is the elephant in the room. This is the elephant that we are talking about. It's basically very easy once you're already inside, and this is the context here. Once you're already inside, it's like having a Google against your Active Directory, which is the yellow pages for everything internally for the enterprise, and you don't need, the important key here is you don't need to be a local or a domain admin in order to do this reconnaissance and information gathering.
So Almog, you need to be on a computer that is part of the domain, right? That's the requirement.
Yeah, the requirement is just having a domain-connected computer and a domain user, the lowest privilege that you can, but it needs to be a domain computer.
Okay.
There are techniques, by the way, to join a non-domain, but in general, yeah, you need to have a domain computer.
Okay.
So just to give you a quick understanding how this stuff is being done usually by pen tester and red team, usually the red team guys. So
I'm sorry, if you could just make your font larger.
Font larger. I hope that I can make it.
Yeah, it's a pain in Windows.
I'll try to do like a different resolution maybe.
Yeah, I think you were down the right path the right time. I didn't see what the error message was, but it's definitely within the PowerShell
It's in
window.
those settings, yeah. I don't remember what is it. That's how long it's been since I've used Windows like that and had to make the font bigger.
Let's try to do it this way. No. This one is really that small?
Well, maybe not. I know the producers can probably be a better judge than I. The screen I'm looking at is not a good.
It's a little small. So I'll try maybe to do a different RDP. Let me stop the screen sharing for a second.
Sure. So, Larry, when you're on a pen test, is it basically Responder, the tool that you're using, to collect a lot of this information passively, right?
Yep.
And it's as easy as like ./responder.
Pretty close. Pretty close.
Pretty much. I mean,
there's
some
a little bit more to it.
nuances in there.
It's
I've
called
noticed, yeah.
responder --help is
Yes.
as easy as it really is.
Yeah.
But also the documentation in the GitHub page is awesome as well. It's really not all that more difficult. And to our guest's point, one of the other ones that we'll often use Responder for is being able to do either pass the hash or hash cracking to get valid domain credentials so that we can use ADUC, like Active Directory users and computers and such, to be able to connect to a domain with credentials,
Right.
but not on a domain joined computer.
I was just going to say, yeah, you can run Responder as long as you're on the network,
Yeah.
you can run Responder and be like, oh, I happen to be, because I think sometimes people know, like, this really vulnerable computer that I know I have on my network, it's connected to some specific equipment or application. I'm not going to put it in the domain.
Yep.
And I know you lose a lot of control, and we've had this debate on the show in the past, but then the attacker gets on those systems, and even when I was doing pen testing, I'd always land on you typically land on the like that one XP.
Yep.
Or
Well,
that
in my
or
case,
one computer missing a patch,
Yep.
regardless of operating system.
Yep.
Right?
In my case, that's
better, Almog.
Yep, that machine that is non-domain connected is my Windows virtual machine.
Yes, I gotcha.
Yeah, it's non-domain connected, but within Active Directory users' computers and the graphical utilities and such, I can tell it, hey, connect to this domain as
this user.
As this user.
I gotcha. And connect your domain. I gotcha. Okay.
So
Almog.
you see my screen better now?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Great. So I needed to lower the resolution here because it's full HD.
Perfect.
Anyway, the point here is just showing you guys how easy to go from a domain user, which is the lowest privileges, basically from a domain, from Active Directory point of view, right? So just to prove that, let's go and prove the audience that this specific mic user that I'm using right now is just part of a domain user. It's not local admin by any means. It's just normal user in the environment. So from this point, usually the attacker even don't need to escalate privileges because they can just identify targets at this point. They can just use a native tools, the net command, which is used for SMB and RPC against the DC. So they just query this AD, domain controller, please give me the domain computers. This is a legitimate query. And it goes only to the domain controller. You don't need to scan the network. This is a huge difference. If you go for the Nmap scans or any other network scan, it's very noisy and it's very easy to identify. The reason it's so hard because it's just...
This has been around since like network neighborhood, right? I mean, essentially, I think the reason this feature exists is so that I can click on that network icon and see all the computers in my domain.
Exactly. So it's about user experience. Microsoft doesn't provide you that for nothing. They want to give you the ability to have a great performance and a great experience inside the Active Directory. But the problem is that it's a trade-off in terms of security. You then get tons of vulnerability and exposure when the attacker is already inside. So this is just a simple query. I can go and even ask, what is the domain admins? And this is just a net commands query, which is a very simple and basic one to get some high-level information. I can even go deep dive and do some LDAP query using this ADSI searcher, which is an LDAP client going again to the domain controller. Again, with the same methodology, just different protocols, and then you get tons of information only by going to the DC without any network scan, without anything. You are not, it's very important to understand that I'm not on the domain controller right now. I'm just acting as a client in the domain user context and going for legitimate and native tools inside the domain computer. I haven't downloaded anything yet, and it's just legitimate queries. So hacker has this huge advantage of getting any information that he wants from the AD without any zero-day or any exploit inside his domain computer.
Beautiful.
So I'll move on from this reconnaissance. Just to give you more context, usually the attacker don't need the Windows 7, the Windows 10 computers. They are looking for specific stuff. So they can even do regex on the query to bring the things that they only want, like the Windows 2012 server, in order to target them. So the entire hacking procedure is based, first of all, on good information gathering, identify your asset, and don't do it in very noisy element. You want to do it stealthy. And in this kind of queries, there is no security solution out there that can protect you from identify these queries. This is the biggest problem that I mentioned from the slides before. You don't have, at this specific slide, you don't have any security solution out there that can protect you from this query and from this reconnaissance. Does it make sense?
Yes.
So I can move on with the demo, and from this demonstration, go talk about more about the APT kill chain and talk what would be next from an attacker point of view.
Yeah, let's do it.
So,
let's get domain admin.
Great. Exactly. So usually it's the same methodology that we are seeing on each and every APT out there, whether it's Duco, most notorious nation state APT, and any other APT out there is using the same methodology. This is the kill chain based on many reports, like mandate reports. It's the same methodology. And if you are thinking about the first initial steps, getting a foothold, the initial foothold in the network, is just a matter of time until the attacker would find a way to do this privilege escalation using a social engineer or using a 0-day. So once you have this privilege escalation, you basically can dump the credentials, find the domain admin, and do whatever you want in the network. So let's try to demonstrate how easy it is once you have found a way to do this privilege escalation. Let me know if you don't see my screen well.
Nope, looks good.
I'm going to change this one as well.
Perfect.
So before launching again the 0-day, the old 0 days that I have here is just again, I'm a domain user, I'm a mic user, and I want to dump the credentials. But the problem with the domain user is that you can run like Mimikatz or any other credential dumping or any other dumping tool that you want. So basically, the next step would be just go after a local system user, which means I need to find a way to move on from a domain user to higher privileges like a local system. So right now, I'm in the context of local system, which makes me a powerful local user that can launch anything. So let's go for the Mimikatz just to demonstrate what a dumping tool look like.
Now, Larry, in most of your engagements, do you find that the local users are admins a larger percentage of the time?
Not anymore.
Yeah,
Not
so
anymore.
people have kind of caught on to that.
Yep. Yeah. Occasionally, we will find some organizations where every user's a local admin, or even on their own machines. Sometimes it only happens within the development groups, and of course, that's lots of fun.
Absolutely.
Well,
Because those are
the
the people that shouldn't have
corollary,
it.
Larry, is how often do you find the admins using their admin account for just day-to-day ordinary activity?
Often, it's about probably 75%. We see the domain admins using their domain admin account to do their checking of email and web browsing and such. The other one that we find a lot of is that the service accounts that get used for various products are domain admins.
Yeah.
When for no reason whatsoever, because that's how
we want it to work. So we're going to make it domain admin.
Right.
It needs to work.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it needs to work, and they don't take the time to figure out what the actual permissions are. And I also blame the vendors for some of that too, because the vendors say, "Oh yeah, you want it to work, you make it a domain admin across, and not what the minimum settings are." So I fault some of the vendors on those as well.
So what's a good recommendation for sysadmins to do their daily activities not using their admin account? But they've got stuff that they need to do at the admin level, especially in the Windows side of things.
Yeah, it's just multiple accounts for the same person.
Multiple accounts. And again, if you're doing domain administration tasks, just like we talked about with doing the non-domain connected computer, there's a potential that why not use those utilities on your machine, but authenticate as opposed with the other user.
Authenticate as, have a virtual machine that you're just logged into that system to do.
Yep.
Domain, so you're not browsing the web or doing really anything else on that system. Would be my recommendation.
Yeah,
it's a good question,
agreed.
Jeff.
Agreed.
Sorry, Alma, continue.
Sure, I totally agree without you guys. So before even launching this domain admin attack, I just want to explain why it's even here in the LSAS. So first of all, a quick explanation about the stuff that I've been doing now. I've launching the Mimikatz tool, which makes me to parse the LSAS. LSAS is the component in Microsoft that make you all this wonderful single sign-on. So I need to go from the it's a protected user, so you won't see it usually. So the LSAS is the component that attackers are going after. It's a local component, it's a local system, so you need to escalate privileges. And once you have this local system, you can basically pass the information from the LSAS and take any information from it. So usually the way Red Team operates, they are just launching their Mimikatz, they are trying to find a box where they have this domain admin inside the LSAS, and from there it's pretty much a game over. A nice explanation why it's even out there. It's because administrators are doing stuff, right? They are installing applications to users. They are trying to troubleshoot stuff. So even if I just want to install to a domain user an application, if I click this run as and I want to use my admin credential to launch this installation, behind the scenes, this kind of operation leaves my domain admin as a footprint in the LSAS. So this makes the attacker very easy.
I'm curious why it caches the credentials. Is there a legitimate reason? I mean, I primarily work on Linux systems, right? And when you use the sudo command, for a certain time period, you can not have to re-enter your password.
Which is configurable.
Which is configurable and does a certain amount of credential caching. But why in Windows does it do that? Is for the same reason if I'm running multiple commands in succession, I don't want to have to keep having the admin re-enter his password?
Exactly. In most cases, by design, it's for the single sign-on feature, where administrator or any other user, they don't really want to enter the username and password every time any credentials authentication need to be done.
I gotcha.
So even not for the authentication, for the authorization, there are tickets. You mentioned before the service account and the service tickets, where Microsoft places only ticket for authorization on servers. So it needs to be done because of the Kerberos implementation and because the single sign-on amazing feature, but it leaves this security all behind it.
Right.
So administrators usually want to operate the network very easily, and this is the way it's being done in most cases. I agree that there are many ways to minimize the attack surface and not leave this footprint, but in most cases we see it on daily basis that attacker and the administrators are just doing the easiest way, and this is it's being done.
Gotcha.
So even after trying to install to any domain user, they leave their footprint behind it. So if I will try to find out what is this NYC admin, it's not because the admin keyword makes him admin. We need to find out if this user is even a domain admin in order to use it. So I can try again and go for this. Some reason this net command doesn't work here. Great. So as you can see, this NYC admin is part of the domain admin group, which makes him a privilege account. And from that point, I can basically just grab the clear text password. I can do a pass the hash if I don't have a clear password, but just to simplify this attack, I can grab this clear text password and run my shell using this password. So from this point,
I know I try and keep these segments short, but the question burning in my mind is what configuration determines the difference between if a clear text password is left in memory versus a hashed password?
So for the Windows 7 machines, before the Windows 8, it's about the length of the password.
Okay.
If you have more than 10 characters, I think it would be hashed. But from Windows 8 and above, it's by default. You don't see any clear text password.
Okay.
But it's the same. Basically, once you have these hashes, like if you have this NTLM hashes, you can do pass the hash, and it's pretty much the same. It doesn't really matter if you have clear text password or if you have
an NTLM hash, right? And that again also depends on configuration as well as to which type of hash is stored in memory, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, we don't have to go into the whole explanation as to which hash gets left behind in which configuration. That's like a whole tech segment of itself.
Yeah. So the way the attacker goes from this point, he doesn't really need any more mimikatz. Depends on the attack, but in this kind of attack, I can just take this username and password and launch a new shell using this specific context. So again, I'm in the context of Mike, which is a domain user. And if I want to launch a new shell using the new context, which I have now because I have this domain admin using this NYC admin, I can just use his passwords that I found from the LSAS. And now I have a totally new context, which is the NYC admin. Now at this point, I can do basically, as far as the network connectivity goes far, I can do anything. I can go to the DC, I can go to any other file server that I want, any other server. So just to highlight a few important reconnaissance.
So, Almog, it's kind of interesting, and I never like really thought hard about it in this context. If in a Windows environment, domain admin is like the highest level. There's no restriction as to what you can access. If anything is resources in the domain, they're at your disposal at that point. It's kind of interesting to think about that and how other systems work. Across the entire domain, file systems, applications, file share, anything is accessible from domain admins.
There are higher privileges from a domain admin, and you can configure application not to support and not to authorize domain admins.
Gotcha.
But usually, as you mentioned, once you have domain admin, it's very high privileges. If you have, for example, network segmentation, you can't like run into the wall, right? You can't like go inside and bypass the firewall if it's disabled the connectivity.
Yep.
But you can go to your domain controller, which allowed by default. Like in this case, domain controller must be enabled from a network connectivity point of view. So I can go to the domain controller and then upload my backdoor and every utility I want, and then spread it all over the network.
Yeah, it's really hard to defend against when someone is domain admin, because even if there is separation, you have access to all of those, potentially have access to all of those other accounts. That any privilege separation they've done, you can pretty much gain access to it in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Exactly. In most cases, it's game over.
Yep.
I want to show you what's next from here. So just quick, another native client that I have that I can reconnaissance the environment is just using NLTest, another admin tool that in most cases doesn't whitelisted or blacklisted and hacker can take advantage. You don't need, at this point, I haven't downloaded a single file. Everything is allowed by default. Everything is native by Windows. Everything is located on the Windows System 32 folders. So I haven't need to download any kind of tool.
Now, but to do the Mimikatz attack, you had to download a tool. That's the only part, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want, the most common way to not use a zero-day or any other Microsoft vulnerability is basically manipulate the user by doing a social engineer. So it's just another way to do so, and it's very easy in most cases.
Right.
People just once you have this kind of box popped up, they usually get inside their username and password, and you can evade that.
Well, even with the Mimikatz attack, when I speak to some of the most advanced endpoint protection companies, there's still it's still cutting edge research to be able to detect that Mimikatz attack. And there are some great theories and some great practices out there that are trying to detect it, but it's still something that I don't see in widespread use. I see it as it really advanced malware researchers or have great ways. Amanda Rousseau was talking about it, and it was in some of her research. She's, of course, one of the leaders of the pack when we talk about malware research. So I still think it's a problem that's pretty widespread. And even if that is required for this attack, again, it's going to be successful in the majority of the environments out there.
You don't really, to be honest, even if you would be able one day to block Mimikatz, even though it's not really possible because there are legitimate applications that need access to the LSAS. In the end of the day, it's just the ability to access a legitimate protected processes called LSAS. So there is like a proc dump, another native another native tool of Microsoft that you can just dump the LSAS and then parse it offline using Mimikatz. So even if the security industry one day would manage to block Mimikatz, you can dump it on a different way, on legitimate way. And
now, when I've read about protecting against the Mimikatz attack, there is a registry key that will prevent the storage of cached credentials. However, if you obtain local admin on that machine, you can put that key back and essentially make it cached credentials again, and it's totally controlled by the individual endpoint, correct?
Exactly. exactly. And also don't forget again the social engineer capabilities that you can admin using social engineer and get their password. But as you mentioned, yeah, there are some fine tuning. But if you consider like our customers are big customers having more than 10,000 of endpoints and managing and setting even at the slightest GPO is huge headache. And policy to push a policy to the endpoint is something that is very problematic. It's huge operational headache, and it's very hard, to be honest. It's very hard to manage this kind of. Not considering even like imagine Coca-Cola buying some other companies, like small companies, and then they're joining their forests, their companies inside Coca-Cola, and now you have this trust between other companies to Coca-Cola. So it's very hard to maintain a legacy support, a new forest, and all this trust makes it almost impossible to identify and to distinguish between real traffic and non-real traffic. And we are trying to go for a different approach in order to be deterministic in terms of detection, this kind of malicious operation. Just to complete this specific demo, another common thing that we see for every APT is using the PS tools, the sysinternal tools of Microsoft. It's basically, in most cases, not whitelisted because it's Microsoft files, it's Microsoft tools. Why should anyone whitelist or blacklist it? So from here, I can do this lateral movement. The simple options is just going after.
Yeah, essentially you PS exec your way around the network.
Exactly. Just think about the way that I'm going directly to the domain controller, right? So I can just choose a domain controller, do my PS exec, and that's it. I'm inside domain controller without almost no need for any 0-day, no external tools. Everything is almost native. The Active Directory essentially is vulnerable by design because of all this explanation. So it's very hard to protect Active Directory, especially with the current security solution out there, and especially when you want a deterministic security solution to tell you it's not a false positive. It's 100% a non-real, non-admin traffic. It's a malicious activity. And in most cases, it's almost impossible to distinguish between this kind of traffic.
Awesome. Any questions from the crew at this point?
None from me, unless I have a completely unrelated question, which is kind of weird. But if anybody else has anything, I'll defer.
Another great statement by John Lambert from a few years ago was the fact that defender thinks in lists, attacker thinks in graphs. So in most cases, attackers are managing the environment using some inventory software or even the most basic Excel. An attacker just getting inside the network, they know how to identify their most high value assets by these reconnaissance options. Some nice tools that not recently, like last year, by Armjoy and the team.
Bloodhound,
yeah.
And just for our listeners, what's the 30-second overview of Bloodhound?
Yeah, so Bloodhound try to take all the PowerShell scripts and libraries that already have been written by this group of Armjoy and the red team from various and other companies. They basically try to take all this Excel data, all this command line data, and try to visualize it in a much more simplistic way to even make the red team life even much more simpler. So it's just a way to visualize the attack path and any other underlying reconnaissance that you have been doing inside the network.
Yeah, it's a great point because as a defender, if you've got more than 10,000 Windows endpoints or Windows systems in your domain, you tend to think, the natural thinking is, well, if an attacker would get in, like, it's going to take them a long time to figure out, like, the lay of the land and figure out, like, what's important and what's not. And then now if we come back to Almog's screen, it's really, we just automated that.
Yeah, we like to refer to that as the, given any endpoint in the network, what's the attack path for us to get to domain admin?
Yeah.
And it's really great.
It's really easy to figure
I've got
out.
these credentials, and if I use these credentials here, this person is a local admin, which that I can use here, which has had a domain admin logged in, because it uses the domain admin, the domain ability for some of the information that you can gather of where some of the folks have logged in recently.
Right.
Exactly.
Or where they're logged in now.
Another important quick note about the way attackers works on real APTs, they're just Bloodhound. You don't need to be live on the network to visualize this stuff. In the end of the day, you import some data through this UI, and basically it's about getting the offline data, upload it into your C2 server, and then analyze offline to get the right path from point A to point B, and how to get to this crown jewel of the company. So it's just a nice way, a quicker way for a non-expert red team, I guess, to visualize path and find domain admin, find path from point A and point B, find logon in admins on specific computers. I'm not sure that I have all the data here, but basically it's another great way to visualize what would be the attack path from point A to point B, and where are the domain admins, and where are the local admins, and where are the active session on specific computers. So it's much easier way to visualize stuff than just go command line like I did now. But it's basically the same way. It's the same way, just a better way to visualize stuff.
Well, that's a fantastic overview, I think. Well, fantastic for attackers, Almog, and very scary for defenders that have to defend Active Directory networks. In subsequent technical segments, we'll talk more about different attack techniques as well as defensive techniques and some specific technology from Javelin Networks that can help you with this issue that I personally think, basically since Jabra came on the show and was talking about his research, I think it's one of the things that we all should be talking about today in the security community. So, Almog, thank you very much for coming on the show and sharing that with us and our audience.
Thank you very much, guys. It was fun here.
Yes. Have a good night, Almog. I know it's late there, so we'll let you go. With that, we're going to take a short break and talk about our security news this week. So stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.
The SANS Institute, the most trusted source for computer security certification training and research. Visit SANS.org to explore their full curriculum and latest training offerings. IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Access over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand for a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your account. Visit itpro.tv/Security Weekly and use the code SW30. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Logarithm's Netmon Freemium delivers real-time network visibility to quickly identify emerging threats in your IT environment. Netmon Freemium is a free commercial-grade network forensics and traffic analytics solution. You can use Netmon Freemium's powerful capabilities to search against all observed network traffic, identify abnormal traffic patterns in application usage, and quickly analyze full packet captures. Take the first step towards real-time network visibility. Visit logarithm.com/freemium to learn more and download it today.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm here to tell you about not just AnyCon. Well, actually, I'm here to tell you about AnyCon, the first hacker conference.
Which con?
AnyCon.
Oh, any of them?
It's the first
Which
hacker.
con?
It's the first hacker conference of its kind in Albany, New York, at the Albany Convention Center.
All right. Any,
June
Albany,
16th
New York. Any, got it.
AnyCon, June 16th and 17th. It's going to feature a capture the flag competition, hardware hacking village, ping pong tournament, several tracks in a family-friendly environment with a keynote delivered by none other than Dave Kennedy or a clone of Dave Kennedy. We're not sure which. Doug White from Security Weekly will be there doing hacker movie trivia segments and giving away hacker movie themed glassware as well as Security Weekly t-shirts.
Excellent.
And anything else that we've ordered that might come in before then, because we've got some special things for certain people. Some things are for everyone, some things are for certain people. Challenge
Hey,
coins
Paul.
are for certain people.
I'm speaking there too.
And Jeff Mann will be there speaking as well. And it'll be the actual Jeff Mann, not a Jeff Mann clone, because Jeff Mann he's the original Jeff Mann.
One and only.
And so we do now have challenge coins. All the glassware is in. So we'll have a selection of glassware. We've ordered, business cards for Security Weekly host and stuff. So you'll get those when those come in. And we've got stickers on order. We've got the first male version of the Hack Naked sticker coming in, which everyone I'm sure is going to love. It's awesome. So we've got a male and female version Hack Naked sticker. Smaller, so they can go on your laptop, which will be awesome. And we're planning on other things. But definitely we'll have challenge coins for very special people who are special to Security Weekly.
Nice.
So all the hosts will have those, a selection of those to give out to certain people. Some will be mailed out to certain individuals who are not hosts on the show. So expect those, guys, which is it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Larry bugged me for a long time to do challenge coins. We finally have challenge coins.
Finally.
We also have a scanning tool for WordPress. It's called Gravity Scan from the folks at WordFence even. Have you guys seen this?
No.
So I think we have a lot of full-featured web application scanners in varying varieties. We have ones that are automated online. Where I think this fits is it's something I've really wanted for a long time. Its effectiveness is yet to be determined as I'm just starting to test it out now. But I think it's interesting that if you've got, and they support WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, and a couple of other CMS sites, there's a couple of different things, right? Like there's generic, like open source vulnerabilities. In other words, I implemented this JavaScript library, which has a known published CVE vulnerability. There's vulnerabilities in WordPress itself. There's vulnerabilities in WordPress plugins, as we very well know. And now we start getting into like the vulnerabilities in those plugins and even in some of those JavaScript libraries aren't very apparent. And I don't believe we have one tool to really cover it all.
Right.
And now Gravity Scan may really impress me and do that, right? But there's a lot of different types of vulnerabilities. When you have a web application, the attack surface grows much larger when you have something like WordPress because everyone's got. You can't even think of it like plugins. You also have to think of it about in your JavaScript libraries, or your JavaScript you're implementing, which is attached to your theme. So, believe it or not, inside of your theme and even your style sheets can hide vulnerabilities. And some of this is published, some of it isn't. And then there's a whole other category in there. Even more two more categories that I can think of. It's in your configuration of WordPress, right? And that can live. Like, did you do some database security? Did you do some security on your web server? Did you do some security configuration in WordPress itself in the wp-config.php? In your application server. So PHP has just like Java, right, or any other. It has an application server.
Right.
So you're using PHP inside of Apache, or are you using FPM? It's typically attached to Nginx. Which actually we just cut over to in our website, which is why I mentioned that. And there's configuration and stuff you can do to improve security there as well. Not a lot, but there is. Also, there's like malware. So you can look for specific signatures of malware that have infected the WordPress. So I guess in all of that attack surface, I don't feel confident that I can go get one tool or from one vendor, one tool from open source. Like, I need multiple tools to basically cover
Right.
all of those, and I've always wanted a more specific WordPress scanner. I always felt that the network vulnerability scanners detects the really common stuff. The web application scanners do a great job of detecting maybe even some zero-day vulnerabilities, but due to the configuration intricacies, may miss some of that other stuff that's in there. And there's one-off scanners that may search for a couple of different strains of malware. So I'm hopeful about the space that we'll be able to have a more encompassing scanner. Now, my whole thing on the issue is, and put this out there for the group, it's great to have a vulnerability scanner or malware scanner or even a tool that does both for CMS sites. How many consumers of these CMS sites, us excluded, are actually going to fix the vulnerabilities that these things find? And that's the real issue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of them they will. And you run into all sorts of issues that some of your stuff on WordPress will require like jQuery 142 for one of your style sheets or something of the like, and
Right.
try to upgrade that shit and it all breaks. And
Yeah, it gets to almost like the Active Directory issue. Like,
Right.
there's so much shit going on that trying to secure it all, because it's just trying to work, right?
Right.
I mean, WordPress is the Active Directory of CMS, right? That's
wow, wow,
drop the mic.
that's a good analogy though.
Jeff, Jack, Brandon, comments on WordPress security or some of the tools or lack thereof?
Or lack thereof of WordPress
I
security.
think you have a WordPress fetish, Paul. I don't know why we're talking about it first.
Well, because we run WordPress.
And it's ubiquitous.
Oh, so it matters to you.
Yeah, well, it's fairly ubiquitous too. We find WordPress on just about every
Everywhere.
pen test we go on.
Yeah. Yep.
WordPress to me, if it's used for marketing purposes and you sort of take backups and know that there's a good chance it's going to be hacked, like, fine, right? It's when people use the plugins for commerce and other stuff, that's where we've seen a lot of problems with it.
Yeah, I agree, Brandon. Like, don't use WordPress for commerce or anything that's storing any kind of sensitive user
Secure data, yeah.
So only use it for stuff you don't care about.
Yeah,
Like,
use it what it was meant for. It's a blogging
like your
platform.
business. Security Weekly.
Well, yeah. We just have we have backups. I mean, that's really, and I think it was to Brandon's point, like, if you're using it for marketing, like we are essentially,
Great.
right? Great, but have a backup, have a way to revert. There was that time a couple of years ago where our WordPress site was hacked, and we figured out how and restored from backups and fixed the issue and moved on with life. It's like Brandon said, when it's used for commerce, it can be bad. Brandon, one thing we didn't get to talk about was the Internet of Things. We really didn't touch on that. And Bruce Schneier just had another. Well, maybe it wasn't Bruce. No, I clicked on the wrong link. It was Bruce Schneier. Hold on. Yes, it was Bruce Schneier that basically posted another article. Essentially, the TLDR is Bruce is saying we're going to have more of these Internet of Things, and ransomware is going to be more of a thing. And when you combine the two, a bunch of people's devices potentially aren't going to work, and that's why we need more government legislation. Does the panel agree, not agree?
I hate to say it, but I agree that, from an IoT perspective, that there probably does need to be, almost like FCC, there needs to be some sort of regulation. I don't know how effective it would be, though. But if you look about trying to secure it through normal capital markets, who is the person that's going to pay to secure an IoT device? It's certainly not you or me, because we can't afford to do that for every single device in our pocket. And it's certainly not the manufacturer, because the manufacturer just wants to get the device out, having some sort of big security thing. Like, they don't think about that. They don't, no, I want to get the Fitbit going. Right. So without some sort of go ahead.
No, and I think in the end, ultimately, the consumer is going to pay for it, in that when something like this potentially gets mandated, that you have to do some minimum level of security that's going to cost increased development costs, and we're gonna pay for it in the end, I think. So
Yeah, but it'll be indirect payment.
right. And go ahead.
Because we don't care as consumers.
Go ahead, Jack.
Pull the pin first.
We just need to open the door to software liability and let class action suits provide the penalties for people doing insecure software.
Wow.
I don't know if I threw that far enough, but
it landed. It landed like right here.
It
like,
landed.
It
Yep.
ran right between the table between Paul and I. Wow.
I don't entirely mean that, but it's a good conversation starter. Who's Dan Gears pointed this out, decades ago. There are very few things in life that have no liabilities attached to them. I believe Dan's comment was religion and software were the two exceptions he could think of.
Well, it is true. I mean, if you get ahead of the problem in software, you can certainly control the costs, right? But as market pressures have shown historically over time, no one really does that. They just want to get stuff out to market. And not everyone is Microsoft that can say, well, our customers are, first of all, a couple things happen there. One, their customers were like, we want more security because it's impacting our ability to use the software. And two, Microsoft was large enough that they could have experts and stop development for some time and implement good software practices and really set the standard for that. But not everyone is. Microsoft's arguably the largest software company in the world.
Right.
Now we have to apply some model that's going to allow your car manufacturer or your Fitbit or your cell phone or your camera to have that same level of security and attention to the security process that is built in the software, the SDLC. I don't know.
I think that as much as I still carry scars from decades in the car business, I think the auto industry is an interesting place because that's an industry that really understands liability, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't work at a management or above level in the auto industry. I mean, dealerships are different, but in the industry itself, unless you're comfortable with the fact that when you wake up in the morning, your entire industry is based on one of the key components is putting a dollar value on human life. Because otherwise, you don't know how bright to make headlights. You don't know how thin to make the sheet metal. You don't know because it's all dollar values. Because you just accept that you're going to be sued continuously, sometimes legitimately, sometimes not. And so their rush into software blindly is kind of interesting.
Yep.
It's fun to watch, having left that industry.
That's an interesting analogy, Jack, because, having said that, and I agree with you, how many years did it take for, automobiles to have seatbelts as a mandatory?
Oh, yeah. There had to be a combination.
Airbags,
right?
Side panel airbags.
There had to be a combination of market pressure and government regulation to push them in that direction. Right. And actually, the airbags, you can make a pretty strong argument that they've gone overboard well beyond that because the survivability rates, at least according to the last three.
Is that a safety consideration or a liability consideration?
Yeah, well, see, that's a whole nother. That's not even a podcast. That's a dissertation. It's interesting where we are and where we are with liability. Who's responsible? And back to the point, nobody's going to pay for this until somebody makes us. And we've talked about it before. Everybody on this podcast and most of our listeners love the connected toys. And if you're like me, you have more wireless network segments for your toys than you actually have toys online.
But future expansion, Jack.
Right. But we talk about these toys, and if people don't know that about us, they assume that we have one big flat LAN with the default configuration that our ISP provided. No, don't do that. Don't put your internet attached doorbell on with your smart thermostat and your light bulbs and your baby monitor or whatever else.
So one of the things that I think would be potentially interesting about this Jack's grenade about opening up software liability issues is that I really think that it may stifle innovation, as it were.
My concern too.
Given that hey, I'm going to write a piece of software, and if someone gets compromised because of it, I'm now liable because I did a crappy job. That will make me think twice, and that will make me not release said software, and I'll use it for myself, and the only person I'm going to harm is myself, so I sue myself. But now release that, and then, well, yeah, no, I don't think so. So we're going to be missing out on a lot of things that now are left up to the folks that have lots of willpower to make that happen.
Yeah,
So
I'm going to throw the curmudgeon card real quick, Larry, and say, what have we had lately, technology-wise, that's been innovative versus, ooh, we can do this. How can we sell it? How can we market it? Where is the demand? Where is the demand gone for some of this quote unquote innovation?
So I don't think it necessarily stifles innovation. That's an argument that we've heard a ton of times, especially in the card space, the payment card space, around putting more security around the cards. But the bigger issue is, I think, when there's a commercial agreement, right? So if I'm going to make software and I'm going to sell that software to individuals, having some sort of a liability there would make me think twice about writing crappy software. But if I'm doing open source things to, show a cool project, or if I sell it to Microsoft or Google, who does have the ability to go back and do the right, security controls on top of it, the innovation can still happen.
Mm-hmm. But you've got to put that out there in the marketplace to begin with, to have folks take interest in it, to have Microsoft want to gobble it up, which at this point you're putting yourself out there to that software liability thing.
Well, and then the question becomes, who takes on the liability? Let's say I'm a commercial company and I'm using an open source code in my product.
Sure.
And the open source code has the vulnerability, or my code has the vulnerability, or the combination of the two. Like, who's liable for that? And I'm thinking of like Raspberry Pi. There's actually a lot of commercial solutions based on Raspberry Pi and Raspbian.
Mm-hmm.
And as it stands today, I still don't think the default password thing in Raspbian, I don't think they have a great fix for that.
Nope.
Because it's still there. You just have to enable SSH. So who's liable in that? Is it the commercial? I mean, obviously the logical thing is to go after the commercial organization.
I'll bring this to one of our stories that we've got on there for what is it, Samba Cry that they're calling it now. The issues with remote command execution or remote code execution on Samba.
HTML tweeted the one-liner in Metasploit.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and it's been around for a long time.
7 years.
And there is, was it? I can't remember whether it was D-Link or Netgear said that they based their NAS code around Samba.
Yep.
And
a lot of people did.
And they're vulnerable. Mm-hmm. So now you have a commercial product using open source stuff, and now who's the one that's liable? Is it the open source project, or is it D-Link Netgear?
It's a good question. That CV is 2017-7494. And Samba's embedded in a lot of things.
All sorts of stuff.
It begs the question, why hasn't someone found this code sooner, this bug sooner? Or have they, and they have not released it? Does anyone have a theory on that?
Sure. I'm sure NSA knew about it years ago.
Probably.
I was going to say, who
Someone's at the NSA is really pissed off right now.
I was going to say, who uses Samba? But what was it, 95,000 devices with the vulnerable Samba versions connected to the internet? Grand scheme of thing in the internet, that's
apparently a lot of people use Samba.
Yeah, well, the other part of that, though, is how many of those don't have authentication anyway, so having a vulnerability doesn't mean anything when they're unsecured.
Right. Well, I mean...
And the point I made on Twitter earlier, this was... the thing to remember about Samba is they have always said that they're trying to reproduce SMB exactly, including bug for bug. So kudos to the Samba team.
Yeah, but this is just a bug in Samba. It's not.
Well, it's
Is it related to any recent or past bugs in the SMB protocol?
I don't know. They're just trying to catch up, I think, is what I'm saying.
Nice, there you go. Nice. And Jack, I will argue with you and say lies, because in fact, no one can actually make a point on Twitter.
Yeah, right. Of course not.
But I digress.
So 110,000 devices with a vulnerable version.
Sorry, 110,000, not 95,000. I thought I read 95.
92,500 of them appeared to run unsupported versions of Samba, for which there was no patch was available.
Gotcha.
That's where the other number.
Okay. Yep. So I wasn't too far off in my craziness.
So if you want to think about extended issues with this, There are a variety of Linux, open source security tools or open source based security tools that use Samba for interaction with Active Directory.
I mean, I think Larry's point is valid. I mean, the NAS devices are just, they all have a Samba implementation.
Right.
Many of them are Linux based.
Yep.
I have one at my house that I'm positive is vulnerable. I mean, the vendor Netgear, I think it was Netgear is the vendor that ReadyNAS is Netgear, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And ReadyNAS has had a Linux environment, a Linux kernel and Linux tools on it for a while. They made devices. My device was unsupported for a long time. The thing just keeps chugging away. It's a friggin' RAID array. Like when one of the drives like blinks that it has an error, I go in and I swap in another drive that like I pay all of like $70 for on Amazon, and it just keeps chugging away and serving files because that technology doesn't need to advance. Now, the advantage that I have with the ReadyNAS and why I feel safe is that the processor architecture is Spark. So if you want to make a Spark payload for this vulnerability just for my NAS, all the more power to you. That's all I'm saying.
Don't worry, I'll get my intern to code it in Haskell.
And there you go. There you go. Code that right up. Code that right up. What else? Larry, you got stories over there?
Yeah. So one that we thought that I found that was kind of interesting, and this might affect you, Paul. And we were having some discussion about this at work today. Pwning VLC and a couple of others by using the embedded subtitle tracks.
Yeah, Cody and Popcorn Time.
Yep, and one more.
Popcorn Time?
Yep, Popcorn Time.
Yep. Which I didn't know existed until I read this article, actually.
Yep. So Cody, Popcorn Time, and Streamio. And I don't know whether this is whether you have subtitles turned on or not, or just if they're present and they're being parsed.
You have to download the subtitle file. The exploit is in the sub.
Right. Well, sometimes the subtitle files are included in whichever media that you're doing.
Correct.
Thinking about this, I mean, great, who cares? I mean, you pop my VLC, but how many people do you know use VLC as their media player?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people build home theater PCs based on Windows. They run VLC, they run Kodi on Windows. I don't think this was a specific Windows vulnerability.
Nope.
Because the problem is essentially... with foreign language films, obviously you need subtitles. There are several sources on the internet that serve said subtitles.
Yep.
But the problem is very similar to a lot of the exploits and vulnerabilities that we've seen over time in that whenever you have to parse a bunch of data in different formats, that usually leads to a vulnerability. And with subtitles, it turns out there's many sources that serve them. There's many different standards or non-standards that define how your subtitles are structured. So when an application like VLC or Kodi wants to support as many different subtitle formats as possible, they have to write code that's parsing data in multiple different formats.
The more complexity you add, the more opportunities there are
and
for
inevitably,
mistakes.
when you're parsing data like that, there's going to be a vulnerability. And it was Checkpoint research that figured out that basically you can trigger code execution off of the way that these different media players parse subtitles.
Yep.
And you're not really validating, like, the reason you said that, Larry, as it pertains to me is because I'm a huge fan of foreign language films.
Exactly.
Specifically Kung Fu movies, for which a lot of them you need subtitles. And you have to go get those subtitles, and you're like, oh, I don't know. There's like a list of 6 sites that may come with my media player, and I'm like, download subtitles.
Yep. And sometimes, depending on where you're getting the content, it already has those subtitles included in the media.
Correct.
And my thinking on some of this, that we were starting to think about going down the rabbit hole a little bit of this was, I'd argue that maybe someone that's a little bit more technically savvy is the one that is using VLC or Kodi or something of the like to process their media.
Yeah.
Those folks may also be more have more proclivity to get that media from various online sources and maybe not from legitimate places.
Correct.
So if I wanted to compromise a bunch of machines in specific locales, one of the things I'd consider would be releasing, say, a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which is like in theaters now or something like that. It's new.
I'm excited about that.
And
huge Guardians of the Galaxy fan.
Release it before anybody else.
Right.
And if you want to compromise a bunch of machines in Russia, include Russian subtitles.
Right. Yeah, it can be very specific like that.
Yeah. And now you're also potentially targeting folks that are a little bit more technically sophisticated that maybe are using that in their enterprise environment. You're getting some very interesting attack paths for something like that.
Absolutely.
So,
that
was my thought on
one
some
could
of that.
speculate, given your theory, Larry, that nation states have probably figured out, considering how well you can target, because you're targeting by language.
If I thought of it,
yeah,
someone else has thought of it. We've said this many
states
times.
have probably thought of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a very interesting attack, and not only that, I think it preys on an interesting point, is that, being a fan of kung fu movies, for example, there's a lot of things that would compel you, not me, but someone, to illegally obtain said films because of a couple of different things. One, general availability. In other words, if it's a foreign language film, it means I can't go to my U.S. Amazon store or Netflix or my local DVD store if I'm compelled to buy a DVD. Most people don't do today.
Do they exist anymore, Paul?
Yeah. And that's another good point, right? I can't just go buy the new Chinese language film that is doing really well in China because they haven't released it in the U.S. yet. So I'm going to go get it online. The other thing is, if I do want to go purchase movies that are made outside of the U.S., as an example, there's region coding on DVD players.
Right. So then you have to get a region-free encoding.
Then you have to hack your DVD player or your Blu-ray player to play region-free.
Or you use software on your computer that doesn't care what the region is.
Right, exactly. It's just easier to go pirate the movie, essentially, and then go find – the point is you have to go find subtitles. Because you don't have the DVD, you have to rely on someone who's posted the subtitles somewhere. So,
maybe someday you should just learn the damn language, Paul.
Believe it or not, I've watched enough kung fu movies that I can pick up on some keywords that frequently occur in kung fu movies. The other option is you have to watch them when they're dubbed, which newer movies I'm not a huge fan of, because it just once you've watched them in the original language with subtitles, when you go watch one that's dubbed, but the old school ones are fun to watch dubbed because the dubbing is so bad.
Oh yeah, it's totally.
There's
you want to fight?
You know what?
You want to fight?
Yeah. There's a good reason for that, actually, because in the 70s, kung fu movies were coming out like at a fast clip.
Sure.
Like at the rate of which porn movies are produced, like Taiwan and Hong Kong. I mean, they were just producing tons and tons of kung fu movies, and they wanted to dub them all really fast. So they found people who were willing to just work and do like 4 movies a day, 5 movies a day at a really fast clip. They weren't given like really any preparation or really any like advanced tools or training. They're just like, and they didn't have a grasp of translation. Like their grasp of translation wasn't low, was maybe medium, not high, right? And so, there was this guy actually who did a lot of the dubbing for the old school kung fu movies, wrote an article. I think I referenced it in my kung fu talk. I think I linked to it in my kung fu talk. And basically wrote an article like here's why the dubbing is so bad. And it was all those circumstances that led to they were just cranking out the dubs for all
Cranking out the dubs.
Cranking out the dubs. Using like boxing gloves or mitts and like ridiculous things to make the sound effects to recreate the soundtrack, and they were just doing it really fast, and that's why the dubbing is so. But the old school ones I'll watch dubbed because they're just so funny to watch dubbed, and it was a lot of the same voice actors that did all of the movies, so you can recognize the person's voice across multiple movies, and they would all translate it the same way. and include all of the same like catchphrases, right? So like the translation from Chinese, whether Cantonese or Mandarin, to English is not. It's an art, not a science. I think in a lot. So like they would just take general sayings and be like, yeah, that's generally what it means in English. So you get like really interesting phrases that appear in all of the movies. But still, they use "but still" a lot. Yes, Jeff. Sorry, I'm not talking about security. I'm going on about kung fu movies. It happens a lot on the show, Jeff.
And with that,
what else you got for stories, Larry?
So this one, someone passed on to me.
You must be tired of living. That's the one. That's the phrase that appears in a lot of it. You must be tired of living. But I swear there's multiple Chinese phrases that translate to "you must be tired of living" because they say that a lot. Sorry. All right, I'm done now. No, I'm really done.
So, and I apologize. This is behind the Wall Street Journal paywall, so I didn't get to a chance to read the entire thing. But you got a pretty good idea as to about the first 2 paragraphs or so. And the title of the article is "All IT jobs are cybersecurity jobs now."
Interesting.
And we've been saying this for a long time, that security is everyone's problem. And, well, now maybe this is the case. Everyone is that's in IT now has to be thinking about security in any of the things that they do, just because we all need to be thinking about it. It's all of our jobs now.
Absolutely. I agree.
So nothing new here, really.
And apparently nothing new with the Wi-Fi story, Larry.
Yeah, no, it was weird.
Because the theory, and I haven't seen this in practice, but the theory is that by analyzing Wi-Fi signals, I can create a map of the surrounding environment.
Yep, and through walls.
Yep. Right. Well, because signals pass through walls.
Right.
So I can map the wall and conceivably what's on the other side.
Right, by seeing what is being blocked by the Wi-Fi signals, and by being able to determine, signal strength, you can potentially determine depth in a 3D environment. And and I know we covered this story when it first came out, but 3 people today sent that story to me.
Well, yeah, because there were researchers that published a new research article on it.
But it was nearly identical to the research that had been published before.
I gotcha. Okay, well that happens,
and if not, it was the same research that just reared its ugly head again. And I went and looked at it, and I'm like, yeah, that's great. And the demos that they did were very much contrived examples, and sure, they worked, but
You're saying
not
real
convinced.
world practice. This isn't.
Oh God, yeah. This is definitely an academic-based exercise to show that yes, it's possible. And maybe we can improve on it. But I'd argue that the wavelength for the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum doesn't have quote enough resolution to do much more than I think they've already done.
What about other wireless frequencies? 5 gigahertz.
5 gigahertz. You're effectively doubling the resolution of the 2.4 gigahertz. You're in order to get quote good resolution, I would argue that you need something very high frequency range.
You need to do distance. You're going to need a higher frequency range.
Resolution.
Higher resolution of your surroundings. You need higher frequencies so that it can penetrate stuff and get a better signal. But now, if you're localized, it's a lower frequency, right?
Right. Distance would be lower frequency.
Right. Because ultrasound is a lower sound waves, but essentially same concept.
Right.
Lower frequency.
So if you think about it, and I'm just going to use a guesstimation, if you think about how wide a 2.4 gigahertz wave is, effectively, roughly, just give or take, that if you can map that wave as it's passing through stuff, it potentially is getting around a device, and you've got that margin of error.
I gotcha.
Now, if you take that into 5 gigahertz, your wave is half that. So now you've got that margin of error. You want 10 gigahertz, your margin is now this. 20 gigahertz, your margin is now this. So the higher gigahertz range you're going to go up, you're going to have smaller waves, which you're going to reduce your margin of error for doing, quote, the image.
I gotcha.
So Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi is like the 1.4 megapixel camera that we have, and now we've got how many gigapixel cameras in our phones now? So like 2.4 gigahertz wireless is like the very first digital cameras where we got 640 by 480 out of them at the best resolution.
not something we need to worry about today.
I don't think so.
Gotcha.
What's the risk to all this? Was there a point to all this research?
We can see you without your clothes on, Jeff. No,
No, you couldn't even tell if Jeff was standing in the bathroom or in the garage. The way it works now.
Right.
And not to mention if Jeff is moving.
The only way
moving, how
right?
Yeah.
The only way we'd be able to tell, and with this contrived example, Jeff would have to be wearing an aluminum foil suit, so we'd be able to see Jeff just fine.
So
I'll make sure I pack that for Vegas.
That's right. If you're tempted to wear your tinfoil
suit,
suit, don't do that because people could tell
that somebody's wearing
a tinfoil. Not even who you are or where you are. That you're wearing a tinfoil suit.
Yeah. No, I quite honestly, I don't. I think it's very much a sort of a scare tactic in that. Oh my God, they can see me through my walls because of my Wi-Fi.
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, I got the X-ray glasses from the back of the comic books.
Yeah.
I could see everybody naked just fine.
Yeah.
That's right.
Of course.
Well, I think in maybe in high security environments, you could potentially not get a map of the building, but identify certain structures, potentially identify certain structures, right? Like,
sure.
Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, you teach the wireless class for
yeah.
science. So, I mean, if you were to do this analysis in let's say, a target that you were going to do a physical pen test on, you could tell where the water cooler is, certainly, maybe, and like large objects where large walls are. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't necessarily be able to get much more, Jeff, than objects and structures in a general sense from a building.
Yeah, you'd be able to do some mapping.
Yeah, today.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so not a huge.
I'm not convinced on the application so far, but whatever.
Yeah, we're not 100%
Yeah,
convinced
no, either.
Yeah.
But you brought up to me 3 times today, so I figured I'd mention it. That's all. So, but.
Well, remind me to troll you next week with some other inane topic, so you have to mention it.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's probably other inane topics, Jeff, that we could defend better than that one. That one was even a stretch for us.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, I actually had a story this week, and I'm not going to dig into it, but the whole WannaCry thing with the ransomware, for those who think patching is simple, some hospitals in Queensland, Australia, didn't get hit. The last I heard, Australia still dodged the bullet, but they decided to patch their stuff. And those who work in medical environments know what happened next. Patient EMR medical records were lost because patching broke all sorts of shit because they were trying to patch to make sure they didn't get WannaCry'd, and instead they patched and got worse than WannaCry'd.
Got patched.
They DOSed themselves.
Yep. And now, Jack, speaking of this one, I want to plant a seed into everybody's head. It's a little bit cloak and dagger and that type of stuff. But and I don't know all of the extents. But think about this: one of the major victims that we heard about first of WannaCry was the UK medical system.
Yeah, National Health Service.
Their National Health Services. Which affected all of their medical facilities. Am I correct in this?
I think so.
It got overblown because they had systems that were impacted, but it was a small number of systems, but it had a large impact.
Okay. So that large impact with a small number of systems, maybe it had gotten, let's theorize it had gotten a little bit more out of control and had put, hospital systems at significant risk where it made them difficult to treat patients, which may not be far off from what we had now, from what we had.
Right.
Now, what would have happened had that been a coordinated attack between that and the Ariana Grande concert?
Yeah, that's what a lot of people were speculating.
I mean, the coordinated attack, and even WannaCry, as many folks have said, which is, it's a good thing they weren't more talented, as something we say in a lot of attacks, right? Or it's like, oh, wow, it's really good these guys weren't better at this. It's really good that it was the North Koreans instead of the Russian. Oh, wait, no, we're not doing attribution.
I want to go back to your Australia example for a moment, Jack. In the patch actually caused more or the same issue as the ransomware. Would they have been better off just deploying like a ransomware protection technology? Would that have maybe caused less issues, right? I mean, if they're only concerned about that.
I don't know all of the details, so I'm not going to speculate. But I think there are some things like, stop me if you've heard any of these things before. Patching what you can patch safely, network segmentation, monitoring, compensating controls. Everything that has been said on this podcast for 12 years and then probably said by other people for 40 years before that.
Yeah, I mean, cyber reasons like ransom free is free and probably would have caused less issues than the patch did. Like, do you just do that?
Something like a third of existing endpoint protection or antivirus or whatever you want to call that class of things stopped it. And
a lot didn't, but some did. Essentially, is
right.
What that
So I've heard between 30 and 40%, depending on who you listen to. But it some stopped it. Who knows? The problem is, and others have said this more eloquently, but what if the hospitals had spent money and were ransomware proof? Was that the best use of their money, or was hiring another ER technician or hiring another, whatever?
Or having a backup facility or a hot backup facility.
Yeah, but the cost of a hot backup facility versus 2 ER nurses. Politically and socially, if you say we're going to spend the money on one thing, it's a no-win situation.
Right.
And if I were, I'm too sober to fully go down the rabbit hole of maybe we should just give people secure systems to work with. But
we'll save that for next time. Everyone, thank you very much for participating in this episode of Paul Security Weekly. It was a blast as always, and we'll see everyone next week. Larry, take us out.
Over and out.